Reading summary of 10 Dead Guys You Should Know on Hudson Taylor. The chapter begins with the chronology of Hudson Taylor's life, born 1832 in South Yorkshire, England. It came to him early on that he was going to do ministry in China and that God would provide for him if he would indeed provide him, if he would indeed go on that journey to China. This was embodied in one of the experiences that he had between his conversion and his call to China. That was at age 17, and the time when he actually set sail for China. This pertains to his time as a medical student in preparation for that, and he came into contact with somebody with a deadly disease. That was because the day before he actually pricked his finger and there was an opening for the virus or the bacteria to actually infect him. So in the procedure of dissecting this body, he began to feel very unwell, and the situation was so bad that his supervisor told him to go home and prepare for the worst, and take a cab and all that and prepare for the worst. Yeah, but in those times, essentially the cab was actually a horse carriage. So the long story short was that even though his supervisor was prepared that he would die, telling him that you are a dead man, Hudson Taylor actually um, survived that infection. All that while two other men had died of a similar dissection wound. When Taylor reflected back on that incident, he said that God had spared him in answer to prayer to work for him in China. He had some strong convictions. One, that God would provide for the gospel work among millions of people in China, and two, that God would never forsake him, even through his darkest times. This this is a belief that will continually mature through the different stages of his life as he experienced God's providence through various challenges, like his family's health and well-being, finances, and workers for the mission work, testing new ministry strategies and methods. So he would overcome each of these types of challenges over and over again throughout his lifetime in setting up eventually what we famously know as the China Inland Mission. Even so, his end of life reflection was that go forward in the strength of the Lord and in the sufficiency that comes from Him alone, and thank Him for your conscious insufficiency. For when you are weak, then He can be strong in you. Hudson Taylor was also a very devotional person. And he gives us a lot of encouragement from through his ministry, through his life reflections, even as he was highly practical as a missionary and very creative on that front in thinking about ways and strategies to reach inland China for God with the gospel. This next section shall cover the period from his preparatory work to his departure to China. So the story started way before Hudson Taylor was born, since when he was a newborn baby, his parents already prayed that Hudson Taylor would be a missionary to China. It really shows us how the prayer of parents can sometimes be powerful and effective. God can hear the prayer of parents for their children. Not to over romanticize this idea, however, I think that there's also a statistical probability in terms of that. Not every prayer is answered. I think sometimes the parent also must be surrendered to God in understanding what's His will for the child and all that. But there's at least some attribution to prayer in the eventual ministry uh, that would come out of Hudson Taylor. So Hudson Taylor's conversion story at the age of 17, he read an evangelistic pamphlet, and immediately from that time he surrendered his life to God, saying that no matter how hard or how easy it is, or how small rather it is, saying however trivial, he will decide to obey God for his gratitude to God for what he has done for Hudson Taylor. So he laid his life upon the altar, making a resolution to serve God with all his heart and soul. So, sensing his calling to the mission field of China, he wanted to prepare himself. He made actually very ample preparations, and it was a period of about 4 years between the age of 17 to 21. He borrowed a book from a local minister on China, and that was when he got into a dialogue that he would remember for life. Um, the local minister was curious, so he asked him why did he borrow that book? And he responded that God had called him to spend his life as a missionary in that land. And then when asked as a follow-up question how he planned to get there, uh, Hudson Taylor had no convincing answer, except on except to rely on him who had called him to supply all his needs. So the minister gave him some maybe wise counsel to say that, boy, as you grow older, you will get wiser than that. So Hudson Taylor was thinking about how Jesus provided for the gospel, the work of ministry to the disciples, for preaching the gospel, and the minister was pushing back to say that these kind of things no longer happen. They only happen during the time when Christ himself was on earth. So particularly, the focus was that the minister thought that he was still foolish and that he will grow out of that and become wiser at some point. In later years, as Hudson Taylor reflected back on that incident, he would say that, with maybe some irony, that although he has grown older since that time, but not wiser, he says that he knows God always provide for the work. And if he is guided by God, then God will open the way and provide the means. So Hudson Taylor operated on very simple trust and faith. And that was to overthrow some of the prevailing earthly wisdom that was proposed to him by that local minister. I think particularly maybe a bit of an extreme to actually refute the truths of the Bible, saying that God no longer operates in the same way that he does in the gospel. And that is totally like a descriptive thing. But Hudson Taylor was able to take the Bible and to apply it to himself, and look what the fruit he had achieved in his lifetime. Hudson Taylor's preparation was marinated in Bible reading and prayer, which later helped him to sustain Taylor through the hardship and heartache that he would experience in his various trials and tribulations. The long and arduous journey into the inland region of China is a unique, distinctive of Hudson Taylor's mission work during his time. This is opposed to this is as opposed to coastal missions, where the other missionaries typically tend to focus on the coastal cities. So they will settle in Shanghai, and then they will make very little progress in the land, and really more focus on earning extra money to fund themselves. Hudson Taylor took the more difficult route of making his way inland to reach the unreached. So we will see that come back again since his entire ministry will be built upon the journey toward inland China. So as we see, Taylor focused on Bible reading and prayer, and this would be an important characteristic of his devotional life all throughout his ministry. In fact, he remarked how Satan would distract him from a prayerful Bible study, even if it means just arranging a window blind. Hudson Taylor's son would also affirm his father in recalling how Hudson Taylor would uh, finish his work in the daytime and then find time between 2 to 4 a.m. in the quiet hours of the night to read his Bible and pray. He was indeed a Bible man and also a very prayerful person. Bible reading and prayer so defined Hudson Taylor that although was an ordinary man, constantly engaged in that practice consistently through his life. He often lamented at his own ungodliness, his lack of Christian progress, as a result of his reading of the book. But he was still consistent in prayer and Bible study, knowing his need for God and for God to sanctify and to grow him. At age 70, he told his children that he had just finished reading through the Bible on that day, the 40th time for 40 years. So that shows us how much of a godly person that Hudson Taylor really was. And even his son and daughter-in-law could affirm that he does not only read it, but live by it. So actually, that was a short digression into Hudson Taylor's practice of Bible reading and prayer. We now return to the year 1853 when Hudson Taylor was just 21 years old and a single man. This was when he boarded the ship in Liverpool um, as part of his work for the Chinese Evangelization Society. So Hudson Taylor was about to finally have this embark on his calling, and he was seen off by his mother at the port as he said his final prayer for his mother, and maybe they prayed mutually for each other. But his final words to his mom echoed Paul's farewell to the elders at Ephesus. But I do not account my life or of any value, nor as precious to myself, if only I may finish my course and the ministry that I received from the Lord Jesus, to testify to the gospel of the grace of God. Acts 20:24. It was very much a bittersweet farewell between mother and Hudson Taylor. As we see here, an emotional cause. Both of them were very torn in their hearts to be separated from each other. But still, Taylor set off, and after the journey of 5.5 months at sea, he finally stepped on shore at Shanghai. And here describes his emotional arrival in Shanghai with gratitude. My feelings on stepping ashore I cannot attempt to describe. My heart felt as though it had not room and must burst its bonds, while tears of gratitude and thankfulness fell from my eyes. So with that, Hudson Taylor emotionally arrived in China, having seen his prayer answered. And almost immediately, he commenced his work in China. Firstly, getting acquainted with his fellow colleagues in Shanghai. So he recalled that he's part of the Chinese Evangelization Society. However, we shall see that this was actually precursor to his resignation and his founding of a new missionary society. Because he was firstly frustrated when he met them. They began laughing and criticizing his method. to dress in the Chinese costume, which included Chinese spectacles and baggy pantaloons, and also even to adopt the local Chinese hairstyle, sometimes with a long pigtail. Further, to add to that, he was also impatient with the existing missionary, with the lack of work inland. They constrained themselves to the coast of China, and as they knew they were fluent in Mandarin, they spent too much time translating for businessmen and diplomats to earn a living, and became worldly and neglectful of their God-given duties. This was in Hudson Taylor's perspective. So that led to the resignation of Hudson Taylor from the CES to set up a news ministry with a co-worker 200 km down the coast of Shanghai in Ningbo. And it was there that he met his future wife, Maria Dyer. And against all odds, given that he didn't have the degree, he didn't complete studies, he didn't have a missionary society, he wasn't even ordained. There were so many conditions that were against him, and he was eccentrically dressed like a Chinese. Well, I guess love overcomes all. They married in January 1858. Maria Dyer and Hudson Taylor. They enjoyed a wonderful marriage together. But not only that, they also embodied a godly couple studying the Greek New Testament before they had breakfast, taking the mantra Bible before breakfast to a whole different level. After working tirelessly together for the next 2 years, Hudson's health began to decline and decided that he needed to retreat to England to convalesce. And he retreated to England reluctantly, um, having formed close bonds with the local church of around 30 to 40 locals. He had to unfortunately part ways with them and return to England on account of his poor health. So with that, they went back to London in 1860 um, with their newborn child, Gracie. This return to England was nonetheless an important period that would actually prepare him immensely to further the work in China and especially the inland missions. Later on, he would uh, receive sort of a spiritual refreshing from a church that he attended in England, and that would help him, and it will give him the grounding and the fuel to continue the vigorous work of China inland missions. So this next section characterizes this next phase of Hudson's life, trusting God with all of China. After having had a little success, I wouldn't say that it's a total failure, but a little success in Ningbo, China, a very small ministry in that first phase, he returned to England to convalesce. And this section covers the phase of his life where he went to Brighton's waters to take the waters, a belief that um, soaking in the water can help him to heal his ailments. He also captured his inner torment with the thought of perishing people in China and his utter surrender to God for the work and the provision for this next phase of his missionary life. So this part here introduces the torment, the nightmares that he had because of people in China dying without hearing the gospel. It became one of his central burdens that would plague him constantly during this phase between 1860 to 1865. He prayed for workers, helpers, and he pleaded with the people, asking his relatives if they know any earnest, devoted young men who desire to serve God in China. However, the results was fruitless. No one came to help, and it showed that and in this phase he had to undergo another season of surrendering the burden to God, knowing that the burden is the Lord's and that the Lord will provide the results. So as mentioned or previewed just now, in 1865 he came down to Brighton to take in the waters, um, thinking that it could help him to cure him of his ailments. But he was to receive a different kind of renewal, attending church that we can find people so rejoicing in God while he was downcast with that burden. But at that moment, it happened that God also made clear to him something, that the work that he was doing belonged to God. And he had a renewed understanding of these words that Jesus said, "Other sheep I have," referring to those in China, "those I must also bring. Those I must also bring." With this, he came to a deep conviction, a confidence that if we are obeying the Lord, the responsibility rests with him. "You, Lord, shall have all the burden. At your bidding, as your servant, I go forward, leaving results with you." This coming from Hudson Taylor was a huge relief, and also an expression of his confidence standing in God, that God will supply all his needs and God will also see through the final result. It is not Hudson Taylor's work to bring in the harvest, but the harvest belongs to the Lord. He prayed some words that day in Brighton that became some of his famous words. He said, "Prayed for 24 willing, skillful laborers at Brighton, June 25, 1865." And immediately the following day, he began making some preparations. He went to the bank, opened an account for the China Inland Mission, depositing all the money he had, around £10. So it's the equivalent of £11,000 today. That could be somebody's entire net worth. And this was when the CIM first began. The first occurrence of the CIM is the in a bank account name. That was Hudson's surrender to trust God with all of China, waiting for God to answer his prayer. He had until this time been vigorous in his work for China and carrying a heavy burden for the salvation of souls in China and for those who may be perishing in inland China. Now he fully committed this work to him, trusting in God that God will see through the mission for him. He was friends with George Muller, who demonstrated a pattern of ministry for him, that he would never ask people directly for mission supplies, but ask God in prayer to work in people to compel them to give to the mission. This is a paradigm known as faith missions. This would come to characterize Hudson's mission. He would have to utterly depend on God. Only God's ears were open to him, and he was not to turn to anyone for their favor. This certainly didn't just come to him suddenly, but it was cultivated by what he saw in his first stint in his China mission. God providing for him in dramatical and astounding ways across the sea, in the face of violent attacks, in the face of sickness and impending death. He had also seen the mishandling of finances, and argued that if people could not trust God to provide for their need, then they need not to go into any mission field at all. His faith principle is explicitly spelled out in these words: God owns all the gold and silver in the world and the cattle on 1,000 hills. We need not be vegetarians. We might indeed have had a guarantee fund if we had wished it, but we felt it was unnecessary and would do harm. We do not expect God to send 3 million missionaries to China, but if He did, He would have ample means to sustain them all. Let us see that we keep God before our eyes, that we walk in His ways and seek to please and glorify Him in everything, great and small. Depend upon it, God's work, done in God's way, will never lack God's supplies. And God indeed answered Hudson's prayers, raising up for him workers, which would later be called the Lammermuir Party, named after the ship on which they sailed. Crew member 18 packs, of which 9 were single female missionaries, which was quite rare in those days. However, we note that they will actually play an integral role in the pioneering mission work with CIM in breaking inland China for CIM. They took a relatively smaller boat that took them 4 months to travel from London to Shanghai, which would have typically taken 6 months. And they arrived in September. During the journey at sea, they also continuously preached the gospel actively. So some of the crew members were in fact converted. Likewise, Gracie was also converted on board by a fellow missionary as part of the Lammermuir party, Jenny Faulding, which would later become Hudson Taylor's second wife after the death of Maria. Some of the results that came out of this second mission trip was pushing inland and upriver, arriving in Hangzhou 200 km southwest of Shanghai. And in December 1866, there were 50 baptized, and there was even a local pastor to help lead the church. However, the success was not without challenges, as they would soon see the death of 2 packs from the Lammermuir party due to smallpox, Gracie due to meningitis. Hudson wrote these poignant words after the death of Gracie. Is it possible that I shall never more feel the pressure of that little hand, never more see the sparkle of those bright eyes? And yet she is not lost. Pray for us. At times I seem almost overwhelmed with the internal and external trials connected with our work. But he has said, I will never leave you or forsake you, and my strength is made perfect in weakness. So be it. So the team continued pressing inland. Some members traveled by houseboat to the next place. And at the end of Hudson Taylor's life in 1905, the end result of his missionary work was that 825 CIM missionaries across all 18 provinces in China, 300 mission stations, more than 500 Chinese partners in ministry, 25,000 Chinese Christians. So a huge number of conversions arose as a result of Hudson Taylor's ministry. It's a testament to what God can do with a willing person, what God will do as we answer our call to the work of missions. So we backtrack again to 1870. That was following his mission work in Hangzhou and continuing to press inland. Hudson Taylor was about to experience his most difficult year of his life. And this section is entitled Trusting God in the Hardest Year. So there were multiple events, multiple deaths that he had to face during that year. The death of his son Samuel, another child Noel died, and then lastly his wife died as well. That was Maria. Maria expressed confidence of and delight in beating Jesus, saying, "I'm not sorry to go to him, but I am sorry to leave you alone at this time." They were an affectionate and adoring couple to each other. Her death was certainly a great blow to him, but God would see him through, as he had already prepared Hudson Taylor for the trials to come. Hudson Taylor had a rapturous moment the year before this hardest year, 1869, when his agony was at its climax. The Spirit of God revealed the union that he had with Jesus, as Hudson Taylor had never known it before. And somebody recounted how Hudson Taylor walked up and down the room saying, "Oh, Mr. Jude, God has made me a new man. God has made me a new man. I see that I'm a branch in Christ, really united to Him. I have not to make myself a branch. If I have $1,000 in the bank and ask the clerk at the counter to give me 500, putting out my hand to receive them, he cannot refuse them to my hand and say, 'They are Mr. Taylor's, for my hand is part of myself.' And in the same way, I'm part of Christ, and what is His I can take." His faith had now taken hold of the fact of his union, living an actual union with Christ. This sudden increase in realization of his union with Christ had a huge effect on Hudson Taylor's life and ministry. During the period of lamentation and bereavement, he was able to later write down in his life, "In the presence of bereavement, in the deepest sorrows of life, He has drawn so near to me that I have said to myself, is it possible that the precious one who is in His presence can have more of the presence of God than I have?" And once, when Hudson Taylor traveled to Australia, somebody also remarked of him, saying that even though he was almost 60 years of age, with tremendous burdens in his life, yet absolutely calm and untroubled. A supernatural grace had befallen Hudson Taylor, and he had a peace to his life that could not be understood. Now, this would certainly be necessary to see him through his next trial in 1899 to 1901, in what was later known as the Boxer Rebellion. At that point, there was growing resentment between local Chinese and foreigners, and especially Christian foreigners. An imperial order came out to kill all foreigners and to kill all Christians, as the religion was seen to be dangerous and had to be exterminated. By some miracle, when the imperial order went out to say that they must kill all foreigners, two officials decided to protect them, changing the word kill for protect. Hence, all the foreigners were protected, even those who fled to the coast, but these two officials were tortured and killed in the most cruel way. These missionaries had survived because of an extraordinary, inexplicable, and marvelous turnaround of events. At the end of the Boxer Rebellion in 1901, 135 missionaries, 53 of their children were massacred. Some 79 CIM missionaries were killed. which formed nearly half of all deaths among gospel workers during this period. This shocked Hudson Taylor in a way that he never seemed to completely recover. He wrote to CIM in Shanghai while he was in Switzerland. And because Hudson Taylor happened to be ill in Switzerland when the Boxer Rebellion happened, and he sent them these words: "It is a wonderful honor he has put on us as a mission to be trusted with so great a trial, and to have among us so many counted worthy of a martyr's crown." And then he turned to address those who survive. Some who have been spared have perhaps suffered more than some of those taken, and our Lord will not forget. So we come towards the end of Hudson Taylor's life, as later he retired in 1902 and died back in China in 1905. To the Chinese amazement, later on when they decide to compensate for the loss of life and property, they refuse to accept the compensation, which earned Christians later on a reputation for their forgiving and generous spirit among the Chinese. It is hard to underscore the impact that Hudson Taylor's ministry had upon China and upon the life of us who are aspiring missionaries. Hudson Taylor's faith and trust in God was so absolute that it demanded his entire life. He placed his entire life on the altar and exemplified in a consistent way what that meant to trust God in different phases of his life, from his youth through his adulthood to his old age. With the various trials that attended a man like Hudson Taylor, he bears witness to a long line of martyrs and missionaries and help us to embody what it's like to put simple faith and trust in Jesus, trusting the Lord for the results of the mission field. I know of someone in my own church who was a 6th or 7th gen Christian, descended down from his great grandfather in China, who was a Christian, a minister. And he can trace back this conversion to the works of Hudson Taylor and his ministry in China. Hence, Hudson Taylor's impact on our society today, even in Singapore here, is second degree at most. Some of the folks that he has converted in China bore offsprings who continue to serve the Lord in their time today. I'd like to conclude this chapter finally with Hudson Taylor's words as he shows us how to trust in the Lord and as he challenges us. An easy, non-self-denying life will never be one of power. Fruit-bearing involves cross-bearing. There are not two Christs, an easygoing one for easygoing Christians and a suffering, toiling one for exceptional believers. There is only one Christ. Are you willing to abide in him and thus to bear much fruit? What he's saying here is that he's serving the same Christ as us. The same Christ that protected Hudson Taylor and provided for Hudson Taylor is also our Christ. There is not another Christ for us who are living more comfortable lives, who are not doing the same extent of cross-bearing as he is. There's just one Christ, and we just need to anchor ourselves on him. As we be inspired by Hudson Taylor's life, we know that it's through the power of Christ that he achieved what he had achieved in his lifetime and attained a palpable legacy that is even felt in the rest of Asia today.